So we are going to be in Daniel's chapter 5 and 6. And I just kind of want to review a little bit. Last week we talked about how God's sovereignty and how he showed his power over protecting Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and by humbling Nebuchadnezzar. And we learned that these young men had absolute trust in God. They trusted him. They had no doubt that God was going to save them. And that's kind of humbling to me to know that there's people that do that, because I don't know if I would be in that. You know what I'm saying? If somebody says, well, I'm going to throw you into the lion's den where we're going to go today. But they had no doubts, and they believed in their God. And today we're going to look through Daniel. We're going to look back here right now, and this was kind of the homework activity. So back to Daniel chapter 2, and this was the first dream that Daniel is asked to look at or interpret for Nebuchadnezzar. So Daniel chapter 2, and we will jump right in here. So Nebuchadnezzar is all powerful, and he's in the second year of his reign, and he's having dreams, and his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king said to the magicians and the conjurers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. And so they came in and stood before the king. Then the king said to them, I have a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. O king, live forever. Say the dream to your servants, and we will declare the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be made a rubbish heap. But if you declare the dream and its interpretation, you will receive from me gifts and a reward and great glory. Therefore declare to me the dream and its interpretation. And they answered a second time and said, let the king say the dream to his servants, and we will declare the interpretation. Then the king answered and said, I know for certain that you are buying time, inasmuch as you have seen that the word from me is firm. That if you do not make the dream known to me, there is only one law for you indeed. You have agreed together to speak lying and corrupt words before me until the time has changed. Therefore say this dream to me, that I may know that you can declare to me its interpretation. So all of the magicians and everybody can't do it. So the call goes out to Daniel. And Daniel answers the king. He went to his house and made matters known to his friends, to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, so that they might seek compassion from the God of heaven concerning the mystery, so that Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed and the rest of the wise men in Babylon. So he was going to kill everybody. This included Daniel and Hananiah, and all four people were going to get killed because they were classified as wise men. So they're trying to save their skins. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a night vision, and then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, let the name of God be blessed forever and ever, for wisdom and might belong to him. And he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and establishes kings. He gives wisdom to wise men and knowledge to men of understanding. He reveals the deep and hidden images. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me the wisdom and the might. Even now you have made it known to me what we sought from you, for you have made known to us the king's matter. So let's look back and see, what did the Nebuchadnezzar do first? Who did he go to? He went straight to his magicians and his wizards, and he's trying to get these guys to figure out. Only as a last resort does he turn to God. or Daniel, and that is turning to God. So Daniel, he gets his friends together, and they immediately turn to God. They're praying that they can get this dream revealed. So what did Daniel do when God revealed the mystery to him? He just started praising. He was so grateful. And in verse 20, he refers to the attributes of God. God is eternal, omnipotent, wise, sovereign, gracious, and omniscient. All the way through 21 through 22, he gives all of these attributes of God. And then Daniel attributes his wisdom and understanding. He thanked God for wisdom in general and for giving him understanding. And then he reveals, interprets the dream for the king. And we'll get into that here. You, O king, were looking, and behold, there was a single great image. And that image, which was large and of extraordinary splendor, was rising up in front of you, and its appearance was awesome. The head of the image was made of fine gold, its breast and its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. And you continued looking until a stone was cut out without hands, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed all in the same time and became like chaff, so that the summer threshing floors and the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone was struck, the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we will say its interpretation before the king. You, O king, are the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory. And wherever the sons of men inhabit, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of the sky, he has given them into your hand, and has made you rule with power over them all. You are the head of gold. But after you will rise another kingdom inferior to you, and then another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule with power over all the earth. And then there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So like the iron that breaks in pieces, it will crush and break all of these in pieces. Now in that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. It will be a divided kingdom, but it will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with the common clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so some of the kingdom will be strong and part of it will be brittle. And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will be combined with one another in the seed of men, but they will not cling to one another, even as iron does not combine with clay. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will cause a kingdom to rise up, which will never be destroyed. And that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but itself will stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it was crushed, and it crushed the iron and the bronze and the clay, the silver and the gold. The great God has made known to the king what will happen in the future, so the dream is certain and its interpretation is trustworthy. That's quite a dream and quite a revelation. So we know that the legs of iron represent the fourth kingdom, and Nebuchadnezzar is the golden head, and all of these things. So God blessed Daniel with this ability. Oh, I jumped over something here. So what does this stone represent? What is that stone? We've talked about it. The stone that was cut out of the mountain that became the cornerstone. God, Jesus. Okay, so he's going to establish his everlasting and indestructible kingdom set up by God. The stone was not cut by human hands, and it will crush the previous kingdoms. So do you remember what blessing Israel, Jacob gave to Judah in Genesis 49? Everybody right off the top of your head? No? Me either. It says that in Genesis 49, the scepter will not depart from Judah. We continue to see this idea confirmed in this Davidic covenant the eternal throne. Okay, it continues on through the lines, even as these lines, the genealogy lines trace down, the scepter is still continuing all the way through these family lines, continuing on with David. The prophecies of Micah and Isaiah and God's promise to the nation of Judah to preserve and restore a remnant, Nebuchadnezzar's dream is pointing to that same future. The Lion of Judah will reign eternally. And if you ever get a chance and follow the line, I know all of the names and the genealogies are really kind of seem like boring, but when you've read through them several times, you can actually see the line of how the line of kings all goes all the way to Jesus, and you can recognize the names, and you can just see how God has moved everything, moved mountains literally to make this happen. Israel's history. God is still orchestrating the events according to his perfect will. Historically speaking, the captivity of Judah occurred under the first kingdom of Babylon, and then the restoration occurred during the second kingdom, which is Medo-Persia. The Bronze and the Iron Kings will take place during the silent years, which we'll talk about more a little bit later. Our God is omniscient, eternal, omnipotent, and sovereign, and he is the source and the giver of all this wisdom and understanding. His thoughts are high above ours, and he is the revealer of mysteries. All this was evident in the dream and its interpretation. The dream implied that Babylon would cease to rule, but beyond that, the interpretation would have meant little to Nebuchadnezzar. To Daniel and the Jews, it offered hope. Another confirmation that God would remain faithful to his promise and that Messiah was coming. So the part that's really important about that is Daniel's probably right about 20 years into captivity, and the kingdoms have been split. Babylon has captured them. They don't have a temple anymore. So they're not having a lot of hope. And these dreams, they'd see the part that was at the beginning, and they could recognize, okay, this is Nebuchadnezzar, this is the Medes and the Persians, and then the rest is hope. There's a king still yet to come. The scepter hasn't been dropped. So these were hopeful times for Israel. And that was your homework. We did it in class. How about that? Okay, Babylon falls. And now we're going to jump over to Daniel chapter 5. Daniel and his dream. This one to me is like my favorite vision that I can just imagine this happening today. It would be so creepy, but it would be kind of cool. Belshazzar, the king, held a great feast for 1,000 of his nobles, and he was drinking wine in the presence of the 1,000. When Belshazzar tasted the wine, he said to bring the gold and the silver vessels which Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. And then they brought gold vessels, that which had been taken out of the temple, the house of God, which was in Jerusalem. And the king and his nobles, his wives, and concubines drank from them. They drank the wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, and of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Suddenly the fingers of a man's hand came out and began writing opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the back of the hand that did the writing. Then the splendor of the king's face changed, and his thoughts alarmed him, and his hip joints went slack, and his knees were knocking against each other. The king called out loudly to bring in the conjurers, the Chaldeans and the diviners. The king answered and said to the wise men of Babylon, "Any man who can read this writing and declare its interpretation to me shall be clothed with purple and have a necklace of gold around his neck and rule with power as third ruler of the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known its interpretation to the king. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and the splendor of his face changed further, and his nobles were perplexed. The queen entered the banquet hall because of the words of the king and his nobles. The queen answered and said, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts alarm you, or the splendor of your face be changed. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirits of the holy gods, and in the days of your father, illumination, insight, and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, set him as the chief of the magicians, conjurers, Chaldeans, and diviners. This was because of an extraordinary spirit, knowledge, and insight, interpretation of dreams, explanation of enigmas, and the solving of difficult problems was found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Let Daniel now be summoned, and he will declare the interpretation. So Belshazzar, what was he doing during this, prior to the hand appearing? What were they doing? Blasphemy. They're drinking, having this party, and they're using all of Israel's sacred cups and chalices and things. So just like total blasphemy, shaming of Israel during this time. And so what does Belshazzar do when he sees this handwriting on the wall? Shaking. Yeah, they said his knees went slack and his knees are shaking. And I couldn't even imagine if we were standing here right now and something started writing on the wall in a language I don't know. That would kind of freak me out. Kind of. It would definitely freak me out. There's similarity here in the other dreams. In all three cases, the king does not go to God first. He goes to all of what he knows, his wisdoms and diviners and magicians before they can't figure it out. I guess I'll go to God and he'll figure it out for me. So he's not choosing God first. All right, now Daniel's going to interpret the writing on the wall. Then Daniel was brought in before the king, and the king answered and said to Daniel, Are you the Daniel who is the one of the exiles from Judah, whom my father the king brought from Judah? Now I have heard about you, and that a spirit of the gods is in you, and that illumination, insight, and extraordinary wisdom have been found in you. Just now the wise men and the conjurers were brought in before me, that they might read this writing and make its interpretation known to me, but they could not declare the interpretation of the message. But I personally have heard about you, and that you are able to read the writing and make its interpretation known to me. And you will be clothed with purple and wear a necklace of gold around your neck, and you will rule with the power as the third ruler in this kingdom. And then Daniel answered and said to the king, Let your gifts remain with you, or give your rewards to someone else. However, I will read the writing to the king and make the interpretation known to him. That's kind of a big deal right there. Belshazzar addresses Daniel not like he's holy. He addresses him like it's a pagan, not giving God credit. He gives Daniel the credit, saying, that you can do these things. And Daniel responds. He tells the king, he says, no, you keep your stuff. I don't want it. My God is going to interpret this for you. And he makes this about God. So now he's going to interpret this, but he's going to send a message at the same time. So here he goes. O king, the most high God, granted the kingdom, grandeur, and glory, and majesty to Nebuchadnezzar your father. And because of the grandeur which he bestowed on him, and all the peoples, nations, and men of every tongue feared and were in dread before him. Whomever he wished he killed, and whomever he wished he kept alive, and whoever he wished he raised up, and whomever he wished he made low. But when his heart was raised up and his spirit became so strong that he behaved arrogantly, he was deposed from his royal throne, and his glory was taken away from him. He was also driven away from the sons of men, and his heart was made like that of beasts, and his place of habitation was made with the wild donkeys, and he was given grass to eat like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of the sky until he knew that the Most High God is the powerful ruler over the kingdom of mankind, and that he sets up over it whomever he wishes. Yet you, his son Belshazzar, have not made your heart lowly, even though you knew all of this. But you have raised yourself up against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your nobles, your wives and your concubines, have been drinking wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold and bronze and iron and wood and stone, which do not see, hear, or know, but the God in whose hands are your life breath and all your ways you have not honored. Then he said, Then the hand was sent from him, and the writing was inscribed. Now this is the writing that was inscribed. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. And this is the interpretation of the message. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and put an end to it. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found lacking. In Paris, your kingdom has been divided and given over to the Medes and the Persians. Then Belshazzar said the word, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a necklace of gold around his neck and issued a proclamation concerning him that he now would be the third powerful ruler of the kingdom. That same night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed. So Darius the Mede received the kingdom at about the age of 62. So we see that Daniel continues to honor God. He told the king to keep his gifts, but agreed to interpret. And as the case was, he interpreted for Nebuchadnezzar. He first emphasizes God is sovereign over everything. Then he went on and he told him everything, humiliated him, told him about the great King Nebuchadnezzar, accusing Belshazzar of the same sin of pride. There's an attribute or characteristic of God that is brought to mind in verse 23. But you have raised yourself up against the Lord of heaven, and you have brought the vessels of his house before you. And you and your nobles, your wives and your concubines have been drinking wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see, hear, or know, but the God in whose hands are your life breath, and all your ways you have not honored. So what is the characteristic of God that we are seeing here? I'm sorry? Judgment. He's a jealous God. He told us in his commandments that he is a jealous God, and he is jealous that these people have done all of these things with all of his stuff and not even bothered to acknowledge him. So he is a jealous God. Mene, these words that we have here, mene meant that the God had numbered the days of the kingdom. And Tekel meant that Belshazzar had been weighed and found wanting. So his judgment, he did not have any good. Indicated that the parson indicated that the kingdom would be divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Basically, the message was sent that Babylon would fall to Medo-Persian Empire. And Belshazzar's pride was apparently still intact because he didn't humble himself at all. And we saw that because he still continued to reward Daniel with the worthless gifts. So God used Daniel to deliver his message to an arrogant king who considered himself supreme. And God once again demonstrated his sovereignty over the kings of the earth. And again, Daniel demonstrated that though he may work for kings, he truly served the Lord. God rewarded his loyalty by continuing to grant him favor and causing him to remain a high official, even as the regime shifted again. And now I want to get into this is the really important story for me, and this is Daniel and the lion's den. So we've gone through this is the fourth king. This will be the third king that Daniel's been under in his 70-year exile with Israel. And it seemed good to Darius, he's the king of the new king from the Medes, that he set 120 satraps over the kingdom, that they would be in charge of the whole kingdom. And over them there was 3 commissioners, of whom Daniel was one, that these satraps might be accountable to him, and that the king might not suffer loss. A satrap was kind of like a governor like a state. So they like had a little province, and then these were the ones that were over the top of them, and then there was 3 that ruled all over that. Then this Daniel began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and the satraps, because he was an extraordinary spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the entire kingdom. Then the commissioners and the satraps began seeking to find ground of accusation against Daniel in regard to matters of the kingdom, or evidence of corruption, inasmuch as he was faithful, and that no negligence or corruption was to be found in him. Then these men said, "We will not find any ground of accusation against Daniel unless we find it against him with regard to the law of his God." So they were trying to find something, anything to convict him over. The only thing that they could found that they could mess with him with was about God. So all the commissioners and the kings and the prefects and the satraps, the high officials and the governors have counseled together with the king that the king should establish a statute and enforce an injunction that anyone who seeks to make a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days shall be cast into the lion's den. So they made up a rule, knowing that Daniel would not abide by it. So now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the written document so that it may be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which may not be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the written document, that is, the injunction. Now, when Daniel knew that the written document was signed, he entered his house. Now in his roof chamber he had windows open towards Jerusalem, and he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God as he had been doing previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel seeking to make a petition and making supplication before his God. They came near him, and they said before the king concerning the king's injunction, "Did you not sign an injunction that any man who seeks to make a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days is to be cast into the lion's den?" The king answered and said, the word is certain according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which may not be revoked. And they had that kind of a code written into their system that once the law was written, you couldn't strike it down. It couldn't be amended or changed. That's why they put a time limit on it. So if after 30 days, then it just went away. But up until then, that 30 days, it was unrevocable. You couldn't petition to have it changed or anything, and that was the way their laws were done then. Then they answered and said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the injunction which you have signed, but keeps seeking to make his petition 3 times a day." And as soon as the king heard this word, he was greatly distressed within himself, and he set his mind on saving Daniel. And even until sunset, he kept exerting himself to deliver him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, "Now know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no injunction or statute which the king establishes may be changed." Then the king said the word, and Daniel was brought in and cast into the lion's den. And the king answered and said to Daniel, "Your God, whom you constantly serve, will himself save you." And a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet ring of his nobles, so that nothing would be changed in regard to Daniel. Then the king went off to his palace, and he spent the night fasting, and no entertainment was brought before him, and his sleep fled from him. Then the king arose at dawn at the break of day and hurriedly went down to the lion's den. And when he had come down to the den to Daniel, he cried out with a troubled voice. The king answered and said to Daniel, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you constantly serve, been able to save you from the lions?" And then Daniel spoke to the king, "O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, inasmuch as I have found innocence before him, and also toward you, O king, I have done no harm." Then the king was so greatly pleased and said for Daniel to be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no harm whatsoever was found on him, because he had believed in his Lord, in his God. The king then said the word, and they brought those men who had brought charges against Daniel. And they cast them and their children and their wives into the lion's den. And they had not reached the bottom of the den before the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. And then Darius the king wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every tongue who were inhabiting all of the land, "May your peace abound. I make a decree that in all dominion of my kingdom, men are to fear and be in dread before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and enduring forever, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed, and his dominion will be unto the end. He saves and delivers and does signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has also saved Daniel from the power of the lions." So this Daniel enjoyed success in the kingdom of Darius and the kingdom of Cyrus the Persian. What a testimony. That is just such a strong testimony, have this pagan king make a testimony for God based on the witness. And that kind of leads me to think that we kind of talked about this yesterday morning in men's breakfast, Paul. We don't have to be standing on a street corner with a Bible, waving a Bible. How we live our lives, how we walk is testimony to our faith and our belief in God. Yes, we need to speak as well and do things that further the kingdom, but people see what we do on a daily basis and how we act and how we interact with people, and I think that is a huge testimony to this as well. So we kind of figure, I did some math on this a little bit, and I'm figuring that Daniel's about over 70 years old, and he's been in Babylon since he was a teenager. And they don't give a good timeline of this. So I can imagine I'm getting ready to turn 60. I would hate the thought of being thrown into a lion's den. Even as if I was 20 or 30, but let alone 60, the fall would take me out. And then I got to worry about these hungry cats eating me. It's crazy. So Daniel was well over 70 years old. But why do you think these other governors wanted to plot against him? They were jealous, power hungry, jealous. That's what they wanted. He's getting ready to be set over us, and he's not even a Persian or a Mede. He's from the tribe of Judah. He's a Hebrew. And we don't want him having any rule over us. So they're very envious, and they lied. So they've set their plot in motion. They lied to the king and plotted against Daniel. So what did Daniel do? What did he do? He listened to God and obeyed God. And I think that is the biggest story to come out of this book, and I think it's probably why it's one of my favorites, is there's so many examples of him obeying God first. And that's hard for us to do nowadays. And I got a feeling we're going to have to do that someday. We're going to have to obey God first. And there's going to be consequences that go along with whatever that may be. And we may have to give up things because of that. But I think it's important for us to know that we have to obey God first. And then he's going to carry us through. He will hold us. He will carry us through whatever those situations are. Yes? He did. Pam said he put his total faith in God. And all of these four men that were there did that total faith. They believed without a shadow of a doubt. We're gonna throw you in a 700-degree furnace. My God will save me. And if not, I'll be with my Lord. And this ties in, this brings into the New Testament. Right. Either way they win. If you go ahead, but I'm going to obey my God, and if I die, I'm with him immediately. And it's the same way with the apostles and the men in the New Testament when they were martyred. You know, better to gain than to be with God right now. I'll instantly be there. But our feeble little human brains are like, oh, but it's going to hurt, and I'm going to suffer. I'm like, there is no suffering as good as suffering for my Lord and Savior. And I hope we can all get to the point where we can say that. So I talked about this a little bit. Darius didn't want to put Daniel in harm's way, but he could not reverse this decree. This was a law of the Medes and Persians, and it comes from the way their system has been written, but they cannot change once it's been put in. So Darius believes in God. He's seen these things, so he believes in God, and he tells him and encourages him that his God would deliver him even as he doubted that, as to the outcome. But he said, believe in your God. So Darius is believing. He's starting to believe now as well. He put that big stone over it so nobody could tamper with it. And after the king spent his night fasting, was not able to sleep, he came out to the lion's den, and he was worried, yet hopeful that Daniel was still alive. So we don't know much about Daniel in the den, but we know what he said. He said an angel came and preserved him. Daniel gave credit directly to God, plainly stated that God was the reason for his safety. So what was his response to Daniel being alive? It humbled him. He saw the power of God, and then he was mad at everybody else. So he threw everybody else in the den, and they were munched and crunched before they even hit the floor. I imagine them lions were pretty hungry. Did God have to save Daniel? No, he didn't have to. He could have allowed him to die. But he didn't. But does God always save his children from evil plots? No, he doesn't. And why is that? Yep, it glorifies. Mm. Yes.
It actually expanded the church instead of
Shrunk it. It strengthened it. Yeah. So everything goes to God's will, and that's part of the hard part for me is not knowing what the plan is. I like to know what the plan is. I mean, I have a list sometimes during the week, and it's got little to-dos all week long, and we get things done, and I like to know what the plan is and how we're going to get there, and then that's not God's way. God says go and do, and you do. And I like to know the plan, so I don't get to know the plan because, 18 years? 17 years I've been here, and if you would have asked me 18 years ago, if I'd have been in Mattoon, Illinois, I would have went, where's Mattoon, Illinois? But I'm here and I'm doing these things, and I don't know what God's ultimate plan is, but I know that I'm here living this part of the plan. And so we keep on keeping on. He doesn't always save us from evil plots, and those evil plots may be part of his will. Yeah. As Pam said, you know, she made plans and I made plans, and they weren't what God had planned, and now we're together and we have a plan together, and we still don't know where God's taking us all the way. Go with the flow, because every time we make a plan, we get laughed at. If you ever want to hear God laugh, tell him what your plans are. And he definitely will do that. So we clearly see that God is more powerful than the kings and governors of lions and fire. There is no one like him. And as Darius said, he is the living God, and he deserves and rescues as he reigns over a kingdom that cannot be destroyed. God is almighty in power. I think you were referring to Hebrews 11 just a moment ago, Susan. Okay. Take some time and read through Hebrews 11 for more examples of suffering for the sake of devotion to God. There's many people that suffered for Jesus. Even if we face death in this present life, we can be assured of victory in Christ in the next. The account of Daniel includes much more than just a good example of faith. We're reminded time and again that God is sovereign, the most powerful over the earth, and we see him redirecting the course of nations. At the same time, we see him faithfully protecting individuals. He holds all wisdom and gives understanding, and he is the revealer of mysteries. And I think we can see a lot of things playing out in our view today of things that God is in charge of and taking control of. And we need to continue to pray. How can we improve in what way should our prayer life be reflected like Daniel's? I'm sorry? Yes, we need to continue to pray constantly and not be afraid to pray. You have lunch with your buddies or your friends or your ladies, and you're at a restaurant, you pray. You thank God for your food. Sue? We do, and that's one of our freedoms and our liberties, is that we can pray, and we don't have to be ashamed of our religion. We have the freedom to express that, and like you said, we take it for granted, and people are shamed for it, and we just need to stand tall and worship our Lord. And They do. And it's been 14 years that we've been together. We just celebrated our 14th anniversary. And, huh? Yeah, we've been together 15, married for 14. And one thing that we always do when we have Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, or whatever, we circle up in the kitchen, and our house is really tiny. I mean, it's so tiny you can plug the vacuum in one spot and vacuum the whole house. But we get all of these kids and grandkids in there, and we circle up in the kitchen. And when we first started it, it was kind of like, seriously? We got to do, we got some humbugs, and really what? Now they're asking us to pray. Okay, let's circle up and pray, guys. Come on, so it works. The example works. I want you to think about this in the coming week. Question: how could understanding God's character impact how you pray? And how does the account of Daniel point us towards Christ? Just things to ponder this week as you're going about your day. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to add? Okay, I will close this out and we will go about our day. Father in heaven, we thank you that we are able to come here and open this book and learn about you, and that you are God and you are powerful and you are over everything that is in our lives. And you are sovereign. We don't see it all the time. We don't behave like it all the time, Father, but give us the humility and the wisdom to know and to do as you desire us to do. I thank you for everyone who is here today and learning and growing. Be with us. Watch over us as we travel our separate ways. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.